Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar of today. You are many persons to be interested in following the webinar on the gap analysis of the harmonized standards for machinery against the new machinery regulation and the associated aspects that will be discussed this morning. My name is Els, and I'll be moderating the webinar in the background as usual. As you know, you're all muted during the presentation, so you're not able to ask your questions right away, but we do invite you to enter your questions in the Q&A panel that you can see in your Zoom interface. So please use that Q&A. The speakers will try to reply as many questions as possible, but since you're many to connect, we do not promise that we can reply them today, all of them, but we do intend to make a Q&A report available that will be shared with you later on. This webinar has been recorded, so should you have colleagues interested, you will be informed when the recording is available. You can share or even listen back to it if you want to. If you ask your questions, please maybe indicate to whom this question is asked for, and also stick to the topic, please. So ask your questions in relation to standardization on machinery, of course. So without further ado, let me take a moment to introduce you the speakers of today. We are a few speakers here in-house and a few of them connected online. So my colleagues Joanna and Ardit are here in the room to support us going through the presentations. And Mr. Peter Broertjes from the Commission is online connected today. And then we also have with us today Mr. Marcel Dutrio, who is the chairman of the Senelec TC 116. He's here in the office today to support us mainly for the Q&A. Thank you very much for that. And then connected online, we have the Senelec Sector Rapporteur on Machinery, Mr. Frank Ronsland, who's here for us for this presentation, and Mrs. Catherine Lubino, who is the secretary of the Sector Forum. So quickly going over the agenda, it's very packed as you can see, so bear with us and please all the speakers try to stick to your timing to make this as fluent as possible. So I'm going to the practicalities for the moment, and then we open with Peter from the Commission with some key changes that have been brought to the machinery regulation recently. Frank Ronsland will then go over some introductory remarks on objectives of the gap analysis and the priorities related to that. Catherine is here for explaining the tool for the gap analysis and of any associated matters to that tool. Ardit, my colleague, is here for the informative annexes set in the transition periods of the whole procedure. And then we go through some practicalities and way forward for aligning all standards to the machinery regulation and linking the project with the regulation in the projects online system. And then by 11:25, it's time for Q&A. As promised, all speakers will have a look at your questions during the presentations and reply as many as possible. So bear with us. If your question is not replied, we promise to make it available in the report afterwards. And then we close down with some finishing remarks of Frank Ronsland as a sector on machinery. So, please, Peter, the floor is yours for the key changes on the regulation part.
Yeah, Els, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I see a stark reminder that I have to give you an updated picture of myself, because I have aged in the meantime. At any rate, it's still the same guy, but I would say a decade or so older. I think that you can see me. I do not see myself, but it's not so important, because I think that what I'm happy to introduce to you, to the audience, and thanks for coming in such large numbers, is about the new machinery regulation. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this webinar is covering the gap analysis, and I've been asked to, first of all, give a slight introduction of the new features of the machinery regulation, but also to help explain why this work is going to be necessary. So if we go to the next slide, I will be able to first give you some of the details of the new machinery regulation. The number 2023-1230. The new regulation was adopted in June and entered into force in July of last year. And then there are a range of application dates in there. Some of them are, or I would rather say, most of the dates that are not 20 January 27 are not so relevant for you. That's for the Commission or for member states to carry out some preliminary tasks and make sure that the forms are in order. But for you, and I think also for other stakeholders, and most notably the manufacturers, 20 January 2027 is when it's going to happen. Then it is mandatory to have products on the market. Hang on, I'm getting a question here. I will save my language. Then it will be applicable on a mandatory basis for manufacturers to place compliant products on the market. No voluntary application is possible by before this date. Now, what does this mean? It means that whenever a product is placed on the market before 20 January 27, you have to declare conformity with the Machinery Directive. If the product is actually also in compliance with the machinery regulation, it is perfectly fine to add that information to the declaration of conformity, but you cannot place something on the market that just declares conformity to the machinery regulation before that date. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, what are the famous aims of the revised machinery regulation? Well, of course, the directive, as we know it today, has most of the same objectives, the well-functioning of the single market, but also creating level playing field. We also try, of course, to have international outreach so that the machinery sector can excel on markets outside of the EU. But then the new items are to make sure that we are ready for the green and digital age, new technologies, and bringing also the provisions on board to make sure that the end user, workers, citizens, that are safe when using these machines with new technologies. Of course, also we open up for innovation. And by the way, of course, the directive is already a good instrument for this because harmonized standards are important, but they are not mandatory. So it's always possible for manufacturers to go, I would say, beyond a standard if they have an innovation, as long as they comply with the essential health and safety requirements. Then, of course, reduction of cost, saving natural resources, and then you have to think about digital instructions, which saves up to 16.6 billion euro per year in printing costs for the sector. And the concept is the same, as I said, with the Machinery Directive. If we go to the next slide, please. Key changes compared to the Machinery Directive. We have increased legal certainty. For instance, by introduction of a few aspects like substantial modification, which is now defined, but also because it's going from a directive which has to be transposed by all member states individually to a regulation which applies across the EU at once without the need for transposition. If a directive is implemented on national basis, the countries have to make their national laws, and there's always the risk for slight divergence, and that means that it's not truly applied consistently across the EU. With a regulation that's different because it does not rely anymore on a national transposition of the directive. Okay, artificial intelligence, of course, is together with cyber safety a very, very important addition to the machinery legislation. Also, autonomous and remote controlled mobile machinery. And then, as I said, also the digitalization, of course, of the instructions and other forms. A novelty is that we working with a list with machinery with a higher risk factor, or high risk machinery, in other words. And you will know them from the current directives, Annex 4. But what happened was that 6 of those articles or product categories have been identified as being the highest risk, and they require a mandatory third-party conformity assessment, meaning that the notified body has to be involved for the certification of those products. By the way, it's not just existing product categories, but notably also artificial intelligence, software or machines incorporating artificial intelligence have been added to this list. Another one, which is a bit of a controversial one, I would say, in standardization land, is the common specifications as a fallback when there is no suitable harmonized standard. So depending on how you want to explain it, if we want to play the bad guys, this is the hammer that will make the standardization community deliver, or else the Commission will adopt the common specifications. Now, I assure you, this is really only a fallback as a last resort. I think that throughout this webinar also you will probably understand that we are going to try to be as pragmatic as possible, because the common specifications is something that we really want to avoid. So we want harmonized standards. And that's why we are appealing to you as a group to make that happen. The common specifications is something that I hope to never be involved in from a personal perspective. The last point is that we have the safeguard procedures that are streamlined with other legislation. This is just an update of when products are in the market, then they are non-compliant, how they have to be notified, and what the obligations are for member states to make sure that no bad products flood the market. If you go to the next slide, please. These are quickly the list of product categories. I will not go into them, but I already told you AI is there, 5 and 6. Self-evolving behavior is, in other words, AI. So it's either the machine that has it already incorporated, or if it is like a software package that has it, that has to be assessed third party. And then the part B list are the remainder of the articles, or the product categories, I should say, and they are basically the existing Annex 4 list, with the exception of the ones that have moved to the A list. So if we go to the next slide, please. This is basically what I explained. So how the list of Annex 4 has been taken apart and put partly in Part A with mandatory, and partly in Part B with optional. And of course, AI has been added to that list. Both lists are subject to updates from our side based on field accident data. So we have also an exercise on our side with member states to get data. And if necessary, we will be able to update the list or add or remove product categories, but based on concrete data from member states. So next slide, please. This is what I want you to a little bit focus on today. Hang on. I talk a lot, and that means that I'm getting a dry throat. But I never learn. So at any rate, I'll just drink my water and try to get through it. The key points of interest and the main differences. So what are we looking at? In our Annex 3, Part B, the general principles. I've highlighted here that risk assessment shall include hazards that might arise during the life cycle. That is not new, but also, and this is an addition, as an intended evolution of a fully or partially self-evolving behavior. So basically, this links it to AI. And what does this also mean? It means also that, for instance, if you have a product that is subject to, for instance, over-the-air updates, this has to be taken on board already from the start, because that's a hazard that might arise during the life cycle. So somehow it has to be addressed in the harmonized standard that if you update software that is AI driven, for instance, and that also the process basically from the perspective of the whoever is the supplier of this software is also capable of making sure that there are no new risks. So this is a pretty essential change compared to the current rules. And if we go to the next slide, then I quickly thank Joanna Frankowska that helped me not miss these points, because I had made a mistake of not including them. But of course, these are the key, I would say, new points in the machinery regulations, essential health and safety requirements. Protection against corruption, or in other words, cyber safety. A supervisory function, and this has to do with how do you say it? With also with the automated mobile machinery, and then the risk of contact with overhead power lines. So these are topics that you should remember and take a look at in terms of the gap analysis, because these topics will come back for you to see, hey, is this relevant for my product category, and how are we going to address it? Or, yeah, basically, what are we going to do with this? And if we go to the next slide, there is the third page of main differences. In point 112E, there is an obligation now that the user can test the safety functions. In 116B, there is a new one about demanding work postures or movements and manual force. If we go to 116F, and that means that AI can be used for human machinery interface, and also responses. So basically, to give just as an example, this is, for instance, a robot or a machine that smiles to indicate that they have seen somebody else coming. For instance, if we talk about a cleaning robot or something like that, so that it knows that, hey, I'm going to stop and not run over you, for instance. AI using control systems, data recording, which is obligatory in case there are decisions made. This is necessary, by the way, for this famous accident analysis that I talked about you before, the one that if there are issues in the field in the EU, that they are reported. That's 121. Then also avoiding avoidance. That is, of course, typing error. Joanna, you missed one. No. The risk of contact in case with human-machine interaction or coexistence in a shared space. So also, of course, now with cobots and robots that really interact with workers and people. And then finally, 162, adequate machine access dimensioning. This is when, for instance, a worker can go inside a machine for cleaning or something like that. Then this has to be, the opening has to be big enough so that this worker can be rescued in case he is, if for some reason, incapacitated. So that is also a change compared to the Machinery Directive. 4, so we go to the next slide. Main difference is 4. Portable, well, it's about handheld machinery that must have some exhaust, fume exhaust provisions. A pretty interesting one is 322 with regard to safety belt use, and a reminder or even an interlock that the machine cannot be used unless the safety belt is being worn. And then autonomous and remote controlled machinery, there is a special complete addition on that. And finally, the filtration of hazardous substances for operators of ride-on mobile machinery applying the substances. 353. So okay, so that is the list of items. If we go to the next slide, I promise that I'm almost done. Now the big question, of course, is why? Why are we asking you to do this? I have to appeal to you also from the side of the European Commission, because we want this sweet, sweet presumption of conformity. That's really what we are after. The industry really, I would say, relies on harmonized standards to give the presumption of conformity, because it gives them legal clarity and legal certainty. And in order to do this, the bottom line is that we need harmonized standards, because we have an obligation also as the Commission, not just to crank out legislation, but we also have to facilitate that our industry can prosper, and that it will provide jobs and so forth and so on. And that, of course, on the other side, I would say equally important, that citizens, workers, the end users are completely safe. So the harmonized standards, I'm preaching, of course, for the choir here, but they are extremely important. There is only a slight challenge. We have more than 800 harmonized standards, and this is, of course, logistically, I would say, a nightmare is probably a safe way to put it. So, and this is why we have, let's say, a pragmatic solution, a possible pragmatic solution for this problem, and that's the gap analysis. So, what are the options that we can do from our perspective with harmonized standards in the machinery regulation? Option one would be to update all the harmonized standards to make them comply with the essential health and safety requirements as they are in the machinery regulation before 2027. This is clearly not going to happen. This is impossible, and we know it too. 800 plus standards, that's just not going to happen. So, option two, we wait. We let the standardization community do its work, and then one by one, when they come, we will integrate them in the list of official journal references. But, of course, this will probably result in a starkly reduced list, and without that sweet presumption of conformity that we want for our industries. Then option three, and I guess you are already feeling that I'm pushing towards that one as the favorite option. What we can do, and what we are asking you to do, is to engage, run the the gap analysis to understand and identify what the shortcomings are of the current stock of harmonized standards, so the 800 that we have. And then this is very important, and to republish them with the restrictions before 2027. So what does this mean? If we have, on the Commission side, if we have a very clear understanding of the harmonized standards that exist today, but which items for the new machinery regulation are not covered, we will be able to publish the reference to the standards with a restriction of the new topics that are not covered. So basically, we are highlighting what the shortcomings are vis-à-vis the new machinery regulation. Why is this important? Because for a large proportion of machinery for which those new provisions actually don't matter, they will be able to get the presumption of conformity. And we think that this is going to be the largest proportion of machinery put on the market. So by this way, we can continue to use the harmonized standards as they are. We give, I mean, this is not going to be an easy job, so don't get me wrong. I'm not capitalizing it that this is an easy job, but it is way easier and way faster than doing options 1 or 2. So basically, it's an intermediate solution. We understand on our side also that some of these harmonized standards, they are not yet completely there, so they could be a little bit outdated, and they may even not have an annex Z, heaven forbid, but we will work with it. So we will understand what are the shortcomings, publish them like that. The industry side, stakeholder side, they can benefit from the presumption of conformity, and we have a certainty that the harmonized standard is not used, cannot be used and say, we have the presumption of conformity where there isn't supposed to be a presumption of conformity. So when the product category has a feature that is actually affected by the new essential health and safety requirements. So thank you for engaging in this web seminar, and I hope that I could appeal to you from our side as well, why it is so important that we go on this path. And thank you very much for your attention. And I give the floor back to the chair of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this useful introduction from the Commission side. I think I can right away hand over the floor to Frank Wonsland, Sector Rapporteur on Machinery, who is going to do some introductory remarks on the objectives of the gap analysis. Please, Frank, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we still see the last thank you slide of Peter. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's okay. That's good.
Okay, good.
That's very
Perfect.
okay. So now you should see mine, I guess.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Frank Wonsland. I'm working for VDMA, the German Engineering Federation, and for 2 years, almost 2 years, I have the honor and pleasure to have the position of Sentinelic Sector Rapporteur for Machinery. So I'm sort of a bit of the link between the European Machinery Regulation and the machinery standardization. And I'd like to give you some, let's say, introduction to the main objectives of this gap analysis, some of the main features. Peter has already given me a very nice transition to what I'm going to say now. I'd like to explain a little bit to you some of the, well, the reasons why to do it, and then also maybe give some advice how to do it, and also to describe a bit the framework in which in which the TCs are about to carry out this task. Now, let me, at the beginning, we have here just added also for looking at it at a later stage, some of the acronyms that you will find throughout the subsequent presentations, also mine. I have highlighted the ones in bold, which are always recurring again and again. And sometimes you may ask yourself, what are these guys talking about? So the famous EHSR abbreviation is nothing else than the Essential Health and Safety Requirements. HEN stands for European Harmonized Standard. MD and NR are Machinery Directive and Machinery Regulation, respectively. And a little bit later, you will also find the weird abbreviation SREC, which means Standardization Request, the mandate, the legal basis for drafting harmonized standards. Okay, so Peter has already laid out very clearly what is the background, the reason for this request for a gap analysis. Ideally, well, we want to have as many harmonized machinery directive standards as possible to be also harmonized under the machinery regulation. And to do that, they would, of course, have to cover everything that is requested or required in the machinery regulation. And we all know that at the moment, most of today's harmonized standards do not necessarily cover the new or strongly modified essential safety requirements. And well, as you have heard already, and I think that's more than realistic, a revision or an updating of all the existing harmonized machinery directive standards with respect to the new regulation within the next 3 years until January 2027, taking account not only the huge bulk that we have, but also the very short timeline. If you think about the former requirements, the requirement that you need to date standards, you have at least 2, or today actually 3 HAAS assessments with potentially negative outcome, which means 3 years is ambitious already for a newly started standard today, and we would have 800 of them. So it's just a task that in this relatively short time frame is simply not feasible and not realistic. And in the worst of all cases, we would start with very few harmonized standards under the regulation beginning of 2027. So I call it here solution. You would also say proposal or idea. The solution is that actually we'd like to transfer as far as it is possible and feasible the old harmonized standards under the Machinery Directive to the new system, to the new regulation, without that regular revision or amendment as a first step, as Peter already said, as a sort of an intermediate solution. Of course, it is expected that in the course of time, in the course of the coming years, the standards that have been transferred are really being made fit for the new regulation, because they will have gaps, as we will show in a second. But for the time being, it would be highly important to have them carried over into the new system. Now, this procedure, of course, needs some boundary conditions, needs some restrictions, because the old harmonized standards can keep the presumption of conformity only with respect to those essential safety requirements that they used to address under the old Machinery Directive. And of course, those new essential safety requirements from the regulation that maybe they happen to already cover today. It cannot be excluded that some standards dealt with technical requirements from the new regulation already in the past, especially if they have been drawn up recently, maybe. So this should not be excluded. But in any case, we need to tell the Commission which aspects that are new in the new regulation compared to the old directive are covered, are sufficiently covered, and which ones are not. And this information needs then also to be indicated in the official journal of the European Union. So that's what Peter meant when he said they may be actually published cited in the official journal with restrictions. So therefore, there came the request from the European Commission to carry out this gap analysis with regard to the new or modified essential health and safety requirements for all harmonized standards that are intended to be carried over in this move. What do I mean by that? Well, in the first place, we'd like to have carried out the gap analysis for all harmonized standards. There may be single cases when a TC says, well, our standard here is so old, we cannot just carry over this standard with a good feeling. We should rather go for a regular revision, even if that means that for 2 or 3 years, we will not have a harmonized document. If a TC says so, if a TC decides to do so, that's fine. But it's quite clear that the gap analysis is the absolute prerequisite for carrying over standards from the old to the new system as they are. And I already was a bit too quick when I was saying that. Of course, this task has to be accomplished by someone. And the typical committee, the typical group to carry out such a gap analysis is in the first place the technical committee in charge of the respective harmonized standard. It will at least be the first addressee from CCNC. The result of the gap analysis then needs to be communicated to the European Commission. And based on the results of the outcome, the Commission can then decide whether a standard or in how far a standard, speaking of restrictions, can continue to be listed in the official journal under the new regulation. And this is the first little spoiler, of course, the template, the tool for such a gap analysis, to have it a bit in a unified manner. If everybody now tries to do some sort of gap analysis and gives some information to the poor guys in CCMC who have to somehow deal with them and summarize them and give that information to the European Commission. That would not be very efficient, actually. So the idea was to have a common tool for every TC to carry out such a gap analysis for its standards. And this tool has been finalized, and it will be presented in a few minutes by Catherine Lubino, who is having the presentation after mine. There may come up the question, yeah, but many standards are not pure homegrown EN standards, but they are actually published on EN ISO level. So what about those? Well, to be very clear, also for the EN ISO or IEC standards, such a gap analysis is expected if they are to be transferred from the old Machinery Directive system to the new machinery regulation in this manner. From my feeling, that was my first idea, actually. Typically, the people in charge of such a gap analysis would normally be call them mirror committees on Senelec level, so the ISO IEC committees. So they would probably be the ones which in most cases will carry out this analysis for the pure reason that this task is, of course, a European task. It's not necessarily an ISO or IC task, and people in the ISO committees will not be very much willing to carry this out. On the other hand, we cannot exclude that. So we would not exclude the possibility that an ISO TC says, well, let's do this as an own little project and we do it all together. Fine with us. So it's not, we do not want to exclude that possibility, and also to keep a good collaboration with the ISO TC anyway. It's strongly recommended that the European technical body, what I called here the SEN mirror committee to the ISO group, shall agree with its international body who exactly should make this gap analysis for an ENI, for an harmonized ENI. I am aware that there may be singular cases where today only the ISO committee exists, where the STEM committee was disbanded in the past for some good or not so good reason, and today we have only ISO. In this a bit unusual case, but they exist, I know that, I would normally think that the European experts in that ISO group are probably the first addressees who would be asked to maybe form a little group or to organize themselves and to organize it within the ISO committee who exactly would have to carry out this task. So in these few cases, we may come to those few committees, or rather recommend to you to come to us and ask for advice, because that has to be really then organized on the ISO level. I believe ideally probably among European experts there. Now, let's talk about the gap analysis. Peter already said, what are actually the possible results and consequences? Well, the goal of the gap analysis is to analyze which new aspects of the new regulation are relevant for a harmonized standard of machinery under the Machinery Directive. And in principle, we have three possible outcomes of such a gap analysis for particular new essential safety requirement. First one, a harmonized standard is not at all affected by the new EHSRs. As Peter said, then that standard is very likely to be cited in the official journal as it is without any restrictions. Second option, second possibility, a harmonized standard is affected by some of the new EHSRs, but covers them already. And it's also likely to be cited in the official journal. And then the third option, which is it is affected by some new essential safety requirement, but is not sufficiently addressing them. Well, in that case, a citation in the official journal is still possible, but it would be with a restriction, saying it gives presumption of conformity, but not with respect to the new essential safety requirement 119, just for example. And again, the message, if a TC decides, maybe for good reasons, to not carry out the gap analysis for certain harmonized standards, they are then quite unlikely to be carried over under this scheme to the new regulation. Some words on the frame, on the boundary conditions to this gap analysis, the most important features. we have set ourselves a quite ambitious date. The gap analysis exercise is expected for the existing bulk of harmonized standards under the European Machinery Directive by end of October 2024. For standards that are now being cited in the official journal only, let's say in early 2024 or even 25, there may be some exceptions here. There may be some slightly longer deadline. Of course, that needs still to be discussed with the European Commission. But for all what we have at the moment, October 24 is the deadline, actually. Important message, the gap analysis does not at all depend on the status of the new standardization request. So it is not an excuse to say standardization request is not ready yet, that conflicts with anything. No, it does not. The gap analysis is a separate exercise that is not connected with the standardization request. And in any case, it is not a regular standardization process. So it is not carried out under an own work item. It is a task that is to be carried out normally by the TCs in charge of a respective standard, but not under a new or separate work item or an existing work item. And this task is also not linked, therefore, to the typical deadlines that you find for standardization projects. Concerning the organization of the work, we would like to leave as much as possible freedom to the TCs to coordinate that internally. Of course, the task will in the first place be assigned to each TC in charge of the standard, because they are the TC secretary and maybe his chairman are the first ones to contact. On the other hand, we know that different TCs have very different structures, some with many working groups, where the working groups are doing the main job and the TC is just coordinating a bit. There are very many differences. So therefore, we will not give a fixed rule who in a TC has to carry out the exercise. It could be a working group, it could be convener and secretary, it could be chairman and secretary if the TC has only one standard, maybe. It could also be a group of specific experts. So the TCs are really free to have that, to make that choice. And some other important messages: the gap analysis is not intended to interfere with ongoing standardization projects. So any active amendments or revisions that are going on, they shall continue as planned. They are not affected by this gap analysis. And new projects which are about to be started in the course of this year, please go on. And if somebody decides that he or she wants to make a standard compliant with regulation, believes that he can do that within 2 years, start with it. It is not the intention to postpone that only due to the gap analysis. Important message, however, a gap analysis shall and can be made only for the latest edition of a harmonized standard that is still listed in the official journal. Here a little spoiler at this point: the gap analysis tool that will be presented in a minute or so consists actually of 2 elements. One is actually a PDF file which simplifies the actual gap analysis work, the practical work to carry out the gap analysis on the document itself, and a transfer tool, which is actually regular updated. And the transfer this transfer tool is the one that needs to be filled out to tell CCMC and the Commission in a unified manner what exactly are the differences, what are the gaps. And this transfer tool can be used only for those standards that are listed in the official journal. The PDF file can already be used as a working tool already. And in case where we have a harmonized standard published under the Machinery Directive, now in early 2024, for instance, but is of course not yet cited, because the citation needs another 6 or 7 months normally, then the group can of course start the gap analysis for that standard using the PDF tool. So the work is done already, but the transfer via the transfer tool can only be made upon the OJEU. So I'm at the end of my short presentation. Just a few key points here. So the exercise is supposed to be carried out on all harmonized standards that are cited in the official journal for Machinery Directive, including in ISO 6D. as far as the TC is concerned, of course. After each citation in the official journal that is coming in the coming year, the newly referenced harmonized standards will be added to that tool. And the gap analysis can only be made for a currently cited edition of the harmonized standard. The deadline is end of October 2024. There may be a slightly longer deadline for those standards that are being published in the course of this year. Each TC needs to decide how to organize the work in the TC on the gap analysis. Also, maybe whether the input of the working groups needs to be validated. That's really up to you. And finally, as I said, it would be good for the EN ISO standards, although most of the work will probably be done by the EN people, by the European experts, to get in contact with the ISO secretariat to clarify who is about to do it. And if it's only to inform them that this gap analysis is being done, because it would probably lead to some, or how should I say, bad feelings if the work is just done by some people without getting in contact with the people in charge. So that's my little message here. And yeah, I'm handing over to Catherine Dubinot, who is now going to explain you the tool for the gap analysis. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Frank and Peter. So I will share my screen. So do you see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, all good.
Very good. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Catherine Dubinot. I am working for AFNOR UNM, and we have the secretariat of the Sense and Elect Sector Forum on Machinery, convened by Frank Wonsland, and the secretary is Caroline Leclerc. As explained by Frank and by Peter, so there is a need for this gap analysis, and also Frank has explained about the possibility of answering this gap analysis via a PDF file or an Excel file. And we discussed this issue within the sector forum, and we realized that we have 26 questions for 800 standards. So it means, and for all questions, we have 3 answers to be given by the TCs. So it means more than 20,000 answers to be provided. Therefore, we said, okay, it will not be possible to deal with that PDF file or Excel file. We need to find another way for answering for providing the information to the European Commission, and also for being able to provide some reports or some statistics and so on. So a website has been created, for which you have the link on this slide. The password has been sent to TC secretaries by separate email from Joanna. And then, as Frank said, the TC secretary with TC chair shall decide who shall be entitled to insert into the standard of the TC, and therefore with whom they will share the link and the password. So this link shall be shared only with persons entitled to input into the tool. For example, the TC secretary, the TC chair, working group secretary, working group convener, or an expert. So it's really a decision from the TC to allocate this task to someone dedicated. Once you enter on the website, you can provide one set of answers per standard during one session. However, it's not necessary to provide the input for all standards of a given TC during one session. This can be done via as many sessions as needed, of course. I will, in the next part of my presentation, go to the tool and show you directly how it works. But here I provide you some summaries in order to have them in the PowerPoint presentation also. So while you will have answered the 26 items, then a summary of your answer will be provided on the screen. And when you click on submit, then your answers will be registered. So it means that when you don't have clicked on submit, your answer will not be registered. So you absolutely need to click on this item for having your answers correctly registered on the tool. And after submission, a copy of your answer will be sent to the person who has filled in the gap analysis in the tool. So by email, so a notification by email will be received. Another important item is that once you have saved the answer for a dedicated standard, it's not possible anymore to correct your answers. But if necessary, it's possible for you to resubmit answers for the same standard. So in that case, you only have to go back to the tool to select the standard once again and to provide a new set of answers. And the last set submitted will be considered as valid. It means that when we will see in the result that we have several answers for the same standard, then we will always take the last version of those answers. As Frank said, it's possible to generate from the tool a PDF template with all the questions which need to be answered so that the TCN working group can discuss them before they put them into the tool. We have offered this possibility because we think that during, for example, a working group meeting, you may want to work on 3 standards in parallel to compare, or you may want to work offline. So then you can use this tool. But as Frank said, do not forget that the input shall be inserted into the tool. The question, so you have 3 questions I will show you. There are 3 questions that are asked when you will answer the questions on the tool. Just to draw your attention on specific points, the first question is this item relevant for your kind of machinery? And the item is, for example, 116. When we ask this question, it only applies to modified or new aspects in 116. So we don't want you to tell all the 116 is relevant for my kind of machinery. The gap analysis, all the questions are only for modified or new aspects, nothing else. It's only that. If you click, we will see that just corresponding to those questions, you can click on a small I and you will see the details of the modifications that were made compared to the machinery regulation compared to the Machinery Directive. I also wanted to draw your attention on a document for which you will have the link with the PowerPoint presentation. It's a document prepared by ETWI and by EuroJIP, where they have compared Machinery Directive and Machinery Regulation, and where you see all the modifications in parallel. So it is a very useful tool to have that in front of your eyes when you enter the gap analysis, to really have the detail where the modification appear in the Machinery Regulation. And a last item, so be careful about the numbering of subclauses. Subclauses, I mean, of the Machinery Regulation. So, for example, clause 3 of Machinery Regulation deals with supplementary essential requirements to offset risk due to the mobility of machinery or related products. So, if a machine is not mobile, the items in the gap analysis corresponding to clause 3 shall be answered as not relevant. So it means that you have to read those requirements, of course, in the field of the subparagraph where it is related. So let's stop this presentation and let's go to the tool. Oh, it's okay on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So while you will have entered your identity and password, then you arrive on general pages with general information that we encourage you to read. Those ones are more detailed and so, okay. And then you go down on this first page, and here you have two possibilities. It's either you click on Start to begin to use the tool, or you download the PDF version and you can, of course, answer the questions on the PDF file. It is a template that we provide you as a PDF file. So I start with the tool. I now select a technical committee. No option, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Ici, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Ça marche plus. So I'm sorry. Seems that there is a problem. I think I spent too much time on the TC, so let me let me 20 minutes to go back to the tool, sorry.
Maybe while you do this, we got a question of someone. Maybe I think the answer to that question is maybe of interest to many people, is how to access the tool. So actually a password was provided to secretaries
Yes.
of all European technical bodies. So they will decide, technical bodies should decide who is the person to carry out the gap analysis in a given TC. So the password will not be shared during the webinar, of course. It should be sent already to the persons involved in the gap analysis.
So I'm back. It's okay. So you arrive on this dedicated page where you have to choose the TC for which you want to provide an answer on one standard. So let's take, for example, CENTC 144. And then you arrive on a page where you see all the standards related to this technical committee. So I click, for example, on the front loaders. And then I have the list of the 26 items for which I have to provide an answer. So let's take, for example, items on ergonomics. So the first question is, I have to look in the small I to see what are the modifications introduced by the machinery regulation. So it's I can read them from the tool and discuss them. And then the question is, are those modifications relevant for my kind of machinery? If yes, are those modifications already covered by my standards? And if yes, provide the corresponding number of subclauses in the standard that deal with this subject. It means, for example, as Frank said previously, you can imagine that for a specific kind of machines, you have already dealt with the risk of working close to overhead power lines, because those machines work outside, and you know that in the previous risk assessment you made for this kind of machine, you already saw that it was potentially a risk. So in your standard, you may already have dealt with this requirement that was not previously in the Machinery Directive, but you dealt with that in a way that may be different than the one you have now in the machinery regulation, because of course you did not know the content of the machinery regulation when you wrote your old standard. So it means if you are in such a situation, you will answer yes, it is relevant. So the subclause 354 is relevant. Yes, it's already covered, and I will provide here the number of the subclause where it is covered in my standard. Okay, so we have to do that for all of the 26 questions. So to be quicker, today I will answer no for all of the questions because, so perhaps this one it's already done, so let's find the 5.6. Okay, so I crossed no to be quicker, to be able to go to the end. So, and you are not obliged to click in the right order. So if you prefer to answer the last question before the second, then you can, and you can go back on the page to answer the other question. So as you can see, I'm not used to click very quickly, but we will arrive soon at the end. Okay, here we are. So now I have answered all the questions. I click here at the bottom of the top of the page on summary. And here I see all the answer I have provided. So I can check if there is something wrong. And then I provide my email address. I confirm my email address in order to avoid any mistake. Then I select my function in the TC. Am I a TC manager, the chair, secretary of a working group, the convener of the working group, or an expert? So let's imagine I am the TC manager, and then I submit my answer. So while I am submitting, I receive an email notification with the same screen as the one you have just seen with the summary, but by email to have those answers. I can, of course, continue for other standards. And now when I come back on my screen, I see that the standards I have just answered is now green. It means that the work has already been registered. So as you can see, I already did another one. I will delete everything after the meeting. And then I say, oh my God, what did I answer for the 136484? I don't remember because I did it 1 month ago or 2 months ago. I have lost the email notification, so I don't remember. Then I'm able to click here. And here you see all the standards already answered. And yeah, when you click on the standard, you see the result provided for this standard. So it means it's very useful also if you are in a dedicated working group and you want to see what your colleagues have answers for another working groups, then you will see their answer by using this possibility. Okay, so as a conclusion, don't forget to use this comparison document from ETUI, that is very useful. And so if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask them, and we will be happy to answer and to provide you some more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine, for this demonstration of the tool. A few questions came in about the tool while you were talking, so if you can have a look, please.
I will.
Also, some other questions are there, but thanks already to everybody for replying a few questions. That is, I think, very useful. So let's continue with the presentations, and I think it's up to my colleague Ardit sharing his screen and going over the annex set. Yes. There you go. Oh, you're too quick. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for the floor, Els. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ardit Chami, project manager in Senelec. I'm supporting both Sen and Senelec technical committees. Today, I will be briefing on the informative Annex Z in transition period.
Can you maybe make a full screen mode?
Yes, I'm trying,
The slides. Yes, there you go. Thank you.
but I will need to find the slide.
Ah,
Automatically, yes. Sorry for the inconvenience and thank you for your patience, everyone. So as some may know, last summer 2023, the technical boards of Sen and Senelec approved the template of the informative Annex Z for draft harmonized standards for the machinery regulation. There's a transition period for the harmonized standards, and will be in some scenarios it will be developed with two annexes Z, one related, making a link to the Machinery Directive, and the other making a link to the machinery regulation. However, we envisioned three scenarios, three possibilities. First one is when the standard will be published with the Annex Z linked with the Machinery Directive. The second scenario is where the Annex Z for the it will be linked. The standard will be linked with Annex Z with the machinery regulation. And the third scenario is when the standard will be published with both Annexes Z linked to Machinery Directive and to machinery regulation. On the next slide, you can view the informative Annex Z, the format, and it is always available as a template in Sen-BOSS website and also on the Senelec BOSS website. The template will be used in the draft standards only at the moment, and after the adoption of the standardization request, the template will be reviewed for final use in the final standards. Thank you.
thank you, Ardit. We're continuing with Joanna, who is looking for sharing her screen to share with you the way forward for aligning your harmonized standards to the machinery regulation. Please, Joanna, the floor is
Thank
yours.
you, Els. Can you see the presentation and can you see me? Very well. Good morning, everybody. Joanna Frankowska. I'm a project manager for machinery in Senelec.
Don't see you. We don't see you. Should you want to?
Yes, I do see.
No, that's weird. I don't. Okay, so.
Yeah, is it okay? The others can
Never
see
mind.
me? Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you very much for attending the webinar, so many. I hope that you find it useful. I would like now to share with you important remarks regarding the alignment of standards to the machinery regulation in general, way forward in general. So you may remember that some time ago we informed you that the standardization request for the machinery regulation will be adopted mid-24. However, now it is likely that it will be adopted later than that. At this moment, exact timeline is not known. At the same time, as you remember and know, it is possible to publish harmonized standards for the machinery regulation only once the standardization request for the machinery regulation is adopted. So it is possible to publish harmonized standard with Annex Z for the machinery regulation only after adoption of the standardization request for the machinery regulation. So at this moment, as we are highlighting in this webinar, thesis shall focus on the gap analysis. This gap analysis for sure will help the thesis to draft Annex Z for the machinery regulation. As my colleague Ardit has explained, the template of informative Annex Z for machinery regulation is already available on our public website, so-called CEN-BOSS and CENELEC-BOSS. And HAS consultants are now well prepared and available to make HAS assessments of standards, draft standards with Annex Z for machinery regulation. So what the thesis should do in this situation where on the one hand, they should focus on the gap analysis, they should draft Annex Z for machinery regulation as soon as possible. They should start having HAS assessments. They should start submitting the standards for machinery regulation to HAS assessments as soon as possible. And on the other hand, the standardization request is not ready yet. So we have discussed this situation this week in the CEN-CENELEC Sector Forum for Machinery. So the joint group that coordinates horizontal aspects linked with harmonized standards for machinery, with the representatives of the TCs, with the TC chairs, representatives of the industry associations, and representatives of the members. And our recommendation is as follows. As far as possible, for the ongoing projects, prepare, so this is for the TCs, the TCs should prepare two annexes Z. One for the Machinery Directive and one for the machinery regulation. Then you should see when standardization request, what is the status for the standardization request, when you will want to submit the standard to the procedures, meaning to submit the standards to a CEN-CENELEC Management Center for inquiry or formal vote. So it is possible and good if you want to already include Annex Z for machine regulation for these standards, draft standards that the TC wants to submit to inquiry. And then it's possible to have HAS assessment of such a standard, HAS assessment at inquiry. However, at this very moment, it is not possible yet to submit draft standards with Annex Z for machinery regulation to a formal vote, because we don't know exactly when the standardization request will be adopted. So if you now have the draft standard ready to formal vote, then this shall be submitted only with the Annex Z for the Machinery Directive. Once such a standard is published, in general, it takes around 6 months from the moment of submitting the draft to formal vote and the publication, sometimes, of course, late if there is a difficult negative assessment or assessment is provided with some delay. But if the standard will be published with Annex Z for the Machine Directive, it will be possible to achieve harmonization with the machinery regulation via amendment. Of course, we will inform you once it will be possible to submit drafts to formal vote with Annex Z for machinery regulation. On the other hand, if you now start a new project here, I mean new project in Senelec, a new work item in Sen. This is not only for brand new standards, but of course, new projects for the revisions or for the amendment. If you start it now, this shall be linked only with the machinery regulation, only Annex Z for the machinery regulation. Why? Because when the standard will be published, then Machinery Directive will be repealed or close to be repealed. And then, of course, as always, we will keep you informed about new developments, and don't hesitate to contact Ardit and or me if you have any question, or if you would like to discuss in the call. We are available for that. Secondly, another aspect that I would like to highlight is that it's important to ensure that the information in projects, so projects is the representation of the Sen or Senelec database that is available to technical bodies officers. So this information in the projects about the link to the legislation, whether the draft standard is linked with Machinery Directive, whether it is linked with machinery regulation or both, this should match the content of the standard, whether the standard has Annex Z for directive, for regulation, or both of them. So this information should be correct at the moment when the draft is submitted to inquiry or to formal vote, or is submitted for HAS assessment. So, for example, including for HAS assessment at first working draft stage. Why is it so important? It is because this will ensure a smooth process of HAS assessments and smooth production process of the standards. For example, if you have a standard that contains 2 annexes Z, one for the directive and one for the regulation, whereas in the database, there's only link to the directive, and you submit such a standard to the inquiry, then HAS assessment will be only requested for Machinery Directive, because requests for HAS assessments are done automatically based on the information that is in a database. So that is one possible issue that can happen. Or it might be that HAS contractor even maybe reject the assessment, seeing that there is a mismatch between what is in the standard and what is in the database, because they check at the beginning whether there is a good match. Or, for example, in case of EN-ISO standards, if you have such a situation, ISO that has the lead and that is in charge of the editing, and they also have the insight to our database, they will see that in the database there is link only to the directive, whereas in the standard there's also another annex, whereas they are not so knowledgeable about this, aspects that are rather European. To be honest, I don't know what they will do. Maybe they will even remove this Annex Z for the regulation and submit to this standard without Annex Z for regulation, whereas the TC wanted to have it for both regulation and directive. So you see, this is why we are highlighting it and why it is important. So now I will explain how to link the standard, draft standard, with the machinery regulation, first for CEN and then for CENELEC. So for the brand new standards projects that for which the work item is created, then for purely CEN standards, as usual, the TC secretary fills in the information in the new work item form. And in this new work item form, it is necessary to indicate the reference of the machine regulation, so 2023/1230 in the dedicated place of the new work item form. And then I will show you on the next slide the example of such a new work item form. However, given that standardization request for machine regulation is not adopted, it doesn't have a number yet, then don't indicate in new work item form any standardization request. For the revisions of EN ISO standards, as you remember, in such a case, there is no need to launch CIB in the TC on the creation of the work item. Because the work item in CEN is created by CEN/CENELEC Management Center based on the notification from ISO Central Secretariat. In such a case, work item is created without any link to EU legislation, and then it is responsibility of the Secretary of the European Technical Body to inform the PM, so Ardit or me, by email to which legislation the link should be established. So then please write such an email and make sure, please, that the topic of the email is clear, like here is the example of the clear subject. And now I will explain how to link draft project in CENELEC. So for the parallel work with IEC, the request to link the project with the machine regulation should be done by email. So here sent to Ardit, who takes after the standardization for machinery in CENELEC. In case of common modifications in CENELEC, we have two cases. So either a technical committee secretary shall indicate in new work item form machinery regulation 2023/1230, or in case the project is created before CDV inquiry, then TC secretary should request again by email Ardit to install the link to machinery regulation. Now on the next two slides, I will show you how this looks like in the new work item form. So there will be three examples. First example, when draft harmonized standard, future standard, for which new work item form is fill in via projects working area in CEN. In CENELEC, to my knowledge, there is no projects working area at this moment. No, there isn't. So then in the new work item, in the place, the section 20 for the standardization request, our old mandate 396 should be indicated, and in the place dedicated to directive regulation 2006/42 EC, so our old directive, machinery directive reference. Now I will move to the case where draft standards should be linked only with machinery regulation. Then in the section dedicated to the standardization request mandate, again, don't indicate any mandate because it doesn't exist yet. In the place dedicated to the directive regulation, please indicate the reference of the regulation 2023/1230. And the third case, in case draft harmonized standards should be linked with both Machinery Directive and Machinery Regulation, then in the section dedicated to the standardization request, please indicate only mandate 396 for the Machinery Directive. The one for the Machinery Regulation doesn't exist yet. Whereas in the place dedicated to the directive regulation, indicate both reference of the Machinery Directive and reference of Machinery Regulation. And now I would like to show you how this should look in projects, going through all these three cases. So first, the case of the project linked with the Machinery Directive. So you see that in projects, you have the reference of the mandate 396 and the reference of the directive. In case the projects, in case the draft project is linked only with Machinery Regulation, then you have no information of the standardization request and the reference of the Machinery Regulation. For your information, once the standardization request will be adopted, for these projects that are already linked with the Machinery Regulation, Sensenet Management Center will complement the information in the database by adding the reference of the future standardization request for Machinery Regulation. And finally, the third case, the draft project linked with both Machinery Directive and Machinery Regulation. So again, this is how it should look like in projects. And again, we will complement the reference of the Machinery Regulation standardization request once it will be adopted and the number will be known. Again, very important in order to avoid errors and delays of HAS assessments or in the production of standards, that there is this correct match between the content of the standard and information in the database. So TC secretaries are kindly asked to ensure that this will happen, but of course this should be done in cooperation, as always, with working group secretaries and working group conveners. So secretaries, TC secretaries are normally expected to discuss this with them, working group officers. The information should be correct, the match should be correct before the draft is submitted to inquiry or formal vote or for HAS assessment. And in case you have any question, any doubt, don't hesitate to contact us, Ardit or me. So I think that was the last time. So thank you very much for your attention, and also thank you very much for your good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ardit and Joanna. Many questions came in while you were speaking, but most of them were replied already, so thank you for that. And maybe can I ask you to have a further look at them, also for the speakers online? If there are questions that you would like to tackle now, please go ahead, of course. In the meanwhile, I would like to remind the attendees that the recording is still running. So this webinar and the recording of the webinar will be shared with you later today, together with the presentation, of course.
So I will maybe start answering some questions, and then I see Peter raise his hand, so then I will give the floor to Peter. I saw the question on the TS and TR. Where was it? Here, Mr. Patrick Moberg. Is also TR and TS in scope of the gap analysis, for example, security in context of machinery safety and functional safety. So at this moment, so gap analysis is to be carried out only on the standards that are cited in the OJEU. And to my knowledge, at this moment, there aren't TRs nor TSs in the OJEU for machinery. So the answer is no. The gap analysis shall be carried out only for standards, regular standards. Then also the question from Lars Rida. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. For standards that you know now have a gap, but which is closed by a revised version with DAV, so publication, date of availability during the first half of 2024, it then makes sense to await the OJEU publication and do the gap analysis in 2025, right? Yes, Lars, correct. So now there's a deadline of end October 24 to do the gap analysis for these standards that are already cited or will be cited in spring 24, because we know that the Commission is preparing the new OJEU list that should be done very soon in spring. Now, if you have the standard that will be published first half of 24, meaning that normally it will be cited somewhere beginning 25. What you can do is that once your standard is published, you can already make a gap analysis via the PDF file together with your working group. And once it will be cited, we will add it to the tool. And then somebody from the TC that will be designated by the TC secretary and chair to do it will be required to key this information in the tool. And also I flag another question from Marcel Knecht. Is it possible to add Annex Z for machine regulation after formal vote to avoid an amendment? So this depends what will be the status of the standardization request. So formally it is possible. For this, it is necessary to have another vote via the technical board, but this is possible only if the standardization request will be adopted by them. So we can discuss a bit case by case. It can also be that your standard will be published for the Machinery Directive, and then there will be addition of Annex Z for machinery regulation via amendment, because it's possible to have amendments only about the addition of Annex Z to machinery regulation. And now I will maybe give floor to Peter. Peter, floor is yours. I think you want to answer some questions, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Joanna, and also thanks everyone for the lively discussion. And as I was typing away some of the replies, I am actually not sure, Joanna, if you touched the standardization request timing, but Mr. Knecht, he asked if we have, so that's you, officially received the standardization request. And I just want to confirm that we are working on the standardization request. We have, of course, already received the input from the technical committees and Sendelec. The thing is that the standardization request is introducing a few, let's just say, new concepts. You may know or may not know that standardization requests have a part where we discuss new deliverables, but there's also the upkeep of the existing stock. And as I've also said in my first intervention, there is 800 plus standards. So The approach is a little bit different with the standardization request to look at the thematic list, or as we also refer to it, domains. And but because this is a departure of the normal approach to standardization requests for the Commission's perspective, we need a little bit more time to make sure that it's all legally sound. So this is all quite legalistic and administrative related. The short version of my reply would be that we are really working towards trying to have it finalized by June of this year. May slip because we are not known for our stellar speeds in issuing documents. So, in any case, in all fairness, but really we want to have this as soon as possible. Realistically speaking, we really hope that it is done by the summer. And by the way, a nice little update for the people from Sensendelec that are, of course, also waiting for some information that we actually do have quite some positive response now from our legal service on the concept. So it was a nice, I think, to give you this latest and greatest information so that we are moving forward with this standardization request.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Any other questions that the speakers would like to tackle at this moment? Ardit, I see you type the question.
Yes, thank you. So there is a question from Mick James. To change a working item that exists currently for Machinery Directive to now also include Machinery Regulation, is that an email to Joanna or a submission of the new working item preliminary? Well, if it's already a published standard, there's a need for a ballot, CIV or CIB, depends if the C is a Sen or Senelec, and initiate a new working item for that.
Okay, thank you, Ardit. Clear.
So I don't know whether there's somebody else who would like to answer the question. In the meantime, I can answer the question from Andreas Dorsch. Hello, Andreas. So it's about the modified essential requirement 112. The modified essential requirement 112 refers to the entire standard according instructions in CEN-BOS. What is expected to be done because of the change? Why is it changed? So we have discussed this matter also in the meeting of the Sensenec Sector Forum on Machinery this week. So for some of you that might not know, Machinery Regulation brought modification in this essential requirement 112 on safety principle. So there's a modification in the letter E of this essential requirement. However, this will not change the approach for addressing this essential requirement as it is now for the Machinery Directive and as it is explained in the instruction, Sensenec instruction that is available on the CEN and Senelec BOS. We are updating this instruction also to the machine regulation, but that will take some time because formally we need to agree it with the Commission and then have it voted by the BTs before we put it on the website. We will do it as soon as possible, but please give us a bit of time. In the meantime, nothing changes as such for this essential requirement 112. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joanna. There is a question that came in from Mr. Frans Nielsen, and I think if I can redirect this to you, Peter, because he wants to know if there is any information on when the last OJEU will be published before the deadline of the gap analysis in October. Do you have that information?
Well, I mean, this is not precise information in the sense that it is signed, sealed, delivered, and decided. And sorry, I guess I have not seen the question yet, but it's about the last one or the first one. Maybe you can clarify this.
The question was raised at 11:31 by France.
31. Okay.
You see that?
Oh, okay. So this one. Yes. Is there information when the last one will be published before the gap analysis deadline? Is there information when will be published before the gap analysis deadline? So basically, what we're talking about is this year publication. Well, maybe I should just approach this question a little bit differently. The publication in the official journal is basically in function of when they are offered the standards and also resources, I would say, on our side. So I'm not going to pretend that we hit the targets every time, that within 2 months it's assessed and published. So we have, of course, some slip. It happens. So honestly speaking, I have no idea when we will publish a last version before the deadline. Normally, we should do it every 2 months. I say normally because realistically, it's not every 2 months. So it's a little bit too difficult to say. But what would be the most diplomatically correct thing to say is that we continue to publish the official journals, and whenever it's necessary, or I would say necessary or required to do it, we will make sure that they are updated within a reasonable time. I think that's the only thing that I could really say about this question for the moment. Now, if this question is more, because I can already feel it coming a little bit, so when will the last version of the official journal under the Machinery Directive be published? That is actually completely open-ended. Of course, there will be a time that we are looking for a transition of the list so that it can move to the machinery regulation. And today's opinion is that we think it would be logical that we would publish the first list of the machinery regulation, so with all the restrictions that you are going to work on for identification, together with the last list of the Machinery Directive. So this would be the same time, and I think, but that's, like I said, it's a personal reflection today. I think it will be in the middle, so of 2026. So let's say half a year before the end date of the Machinery Directive, or half a year before the start date of the machinery regulation. However, as I said, it's open-ended too, because there could be still, heaven forbid, by the way, but a formal objection that we have to take on board urgently. So basically, it could be that there will still be updates to it. This is something that we cannot foresee how it will evolve. But let's say, if we talk about the perfect world, I would say half a year before. So the middle of 2026 for the last Machinery Directive one and the first Machinery Regulation one. I hope that little bit gives an idea of the roadmap, but it's completely subject also to what's going on and what kind of progress is being made, and it's not completely fixed, but that's, I would say, for the moment the most realistic outlook.
Okay, thank you, Peter, for clarifying that. Joanna, I see that you flagged another question.
Yes, thank you. So Barry Cox asks, when will EN 13849-1, so type B standard, be published in OJEU, and will it be published with Annex A for Machine Directive or Machine Regulation, or both? The OJEU list, according to the information we have from the Commission, is now under preparation and should be published soon. And normally, this standard should be published in the OJEU. However, it will have only Annex Z for the Machinery Directive. And also, I can see there's a question from Manfred Krebs regarding multi-part standards. Does the gap analysis also take into account the fact that there are multi-part standards or series of standards? Are the reasons that restrict the application of the gap analysis to such series of standards? So normally, gap analysis is for all standards that are cited in the OJEU. Including multi-part standards that are about 30% of all our harmonized standards. So yes, gap analysis should be made also for these standards. If you have different times of the citations of respective parts, part one, please discuss with TC secretary, because that maybe needs to be discussed case by case basis. And then, of course, TC secretary is welcome to contact us to discuss if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. I see that Frank also flagged the question.
Yes, thank you. I took up a question from Thomas Schreiber from Dean, was describing the case that he says they had several work items, or one work item, I don't know, that ran out of time and they would have to restart them in due time. And currently they are only registered under the Machinery Directive. And he asks for the recommendation for the restart. And my recommendation would be, well, depending on whether they think that it's a very quick work that might be finalized in the course of next year, I have no idea what they are, certainly register them also under the machinery regulation already. That's for sure. That's what I would recommend for any project that's now being started or restarted. If you believe that the standard is probably to be published later than 2026, then one might actually question whether it's worth having it also under Machinery Directive or only under Machinery Regulation. But in any case, certainly under Machinery Regulation. For the time being, I believe it's not a problem. If you're not 100% sure, it's registered under both. And also to draw up, to start drawing up 2 annexes Z. And when in the course of the project you find that it will take a bit longer, one would then, of course, simply take out the Machinery Directive Z8. When you see that 2025 or 6, the project takes longer. But certainly to have it also registered under direction. That's my personal view on that.
Thank you, Frank.
And sorry, there's one thing I'd like to correct, because I gave an answer to, I think it was to Claudia Vezzaro, who asked me how a TC is supposed to decide whether in the gap analysis a new essential safety requirement is already covered sufficiently, just in case that the TC is doing that. Of course, that decision, well, the TC can claim, because they are maybe convinced that they sufficiently cover it. The decision whether this is really sort of accepted lies with the Commission. So just saying we cover it sufficiently is by no means a guarantee that this will be automatically taken for granted. If we just have a nice standard, certainly we cover it. No, this is definitely, of course, not an automatism. That's why I was saying it may cover mainly cases where you may have, for instance, in your standard, an explicit paragraph that already dealt with it in the past, and then the TC is convinced that this sufficiently covers it. You may, of course, but it's for those cases where you would say, where you then say, yeah, we cover it already, and then you would have to give it to give the clause in the answer list of the gap analysis tool. But of course, the final decision to confirm that is with the Commission. That's quite clear. Sorry for that little inaccuracy.
Thank you, Frank. Joanna, any other question you would like to tackle now? If not, I would like to propose to launch the feedback poll. It's a short poll with 3 questions that ask the attendees to provide their feedback on this webinar. We mainly use it to improve our webinars in the future. So if you can take just a few seconds to reply to questions, then we can close down with the closing remarks of Frank. Maybe by showing the next slide. I think there's a slide for that. Here we are. I don't know if we want to share, or do you prefer to share your screen, Frank, for this part? If yes, please
Actually,
go.
I think you have it on the screen already. It's not. I was not about to flood people with 10 pages of closing remarks, so I think we can use yours. Actually, so
Okay.
that's fine. Okay, so thank you. So in my role as sector rapporteur on machinery, I have the honor and pleasure to give the closing remarks to today's session. So first of all, thanks to all the. Well, no, I put the thanks at the end. So first, let me give some final, how should I say, some little summary of the main take-home messages for today. So if you can go to the next slide and put the thank you to all of you to the very end. So just for the main key takeaways concerning the gap analysis, it's a repetition of what you already saw already. So the exercise of the gap analysis should be carried out for all harmonized standards cited in the official journal under the Machinery Directive, including ENIC standards. Of course, only as far as TCs are willing or believe that the standard should be carried over. Then the gap analysis shall be made strictly for the current edition for the harmonized standard, as it is also indicated in the tool. The tool will only contain, as you may have seen in the presentation by Catherine, it contains really direct references to the latest cited edition. If we have new citations, those standards will be added to the tool, and in that sense also replace the older ones with the previous edition, with the previous citations. The tool will give the possibility to provide a PDF file, but the result of the gap analysis is to be transferred via the main tool. Actually, the deadline is end of October 2024. There may be some exceptions, some elongations and extensions for those standards that are being cited in the course of 2024, beginning of 25. The TCs shall decide how to organize their work themselves. We do not want to give clear directions who has to carry it out, not be useful. And of course, please, for the ENISO standards, also get in contact with your international TCs. While in most cases, I believe, it would be the European experts, there should be a good communication with the ISO Secretariat also to avoid getting in some, how should I say, quarreling within the TCs who should do it, surprising them with some work being carried out without their knowledge. And then the second slide is more about it's called about other aspects. It concerns actually practical issues more for the TC secretaries. As Joanna has pointed out, new projects, or in general projects, can today in Projects Online be linked either with the Machinery Directive only, or with Machinery Regulation, or with both regulations. What we can say is harmonized standards in support of the Machinery Regulation can be published only after the standardization request is adopted. It's quite easy to understand. You have in the foreword and in the preliminary observations for the Annex ZA, you have a direct reference to the standardization request, and at the moment it's not yet there, so you can't give a number to it. So that's also the reason why, for the time being, at this very moment, harmonized standards in support of the Machinery Directive can, of course, be submitted to formal vote, but for a regulation, we may have to wait until the standardization request is there. Nevertheless, the strong recommendation, actually a request, is to prepare at this moment an Annex Z for both, for the MD and for MR, for all ongoing projects that are at least in a phase where you can still have technical changes. projects that are right before formal vote and are under the Machinery Directive is probably not useful. There you would rather make immediately upon their citation in the Efficient Journal a gap analysis and well, supply that one to the European Commission or to CCMC actually. The template for the informative annex said for the MR, that is this empty table with the right preliminary observations, is available on CENBOS, where you find the SREC number of the XXS, of course. The request from CCMC mainly, and that's a very practical issue. When in every step when you have public inquiry, when you submit documents to public inquiry or to formal vote to the secretaries, please make sure that the draft matches the link with the Machinery Directive or Machinery Regulation matches the content, not just the claim of the draft harmonized standards. And if you make a new work item, please make sure that you have the correct link in Projects Online to the regulations that you want to cover. And if you have an ongoing project for the Machinery Directive only, and you want to add the Machinery Regulation to it, I believe this is not, well, once the work item is already running, so you cannot change that on Projects Online. So in that case, of course, please inform or contact your program manager at CCMC so they can do that, because you will of course not be able to do it by yourself. So these are, I think, the key messages of today. And well, can you go to the next slide? But I guess that's the last one. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So from my side, I'd like to extend a big thank you to all the speakers of today. I'd like to thank very much Els Sommers, who magnificently prepared this whole session and gave us all the technical support also. I'd like to explicitly thank Peter Proteus for his willingness to give us the introduction for the Machinery Directive in general, and also for his willingness to answer so many questions. Thank you also to Joanna and Ardit from CCMC for their brilliant work and for their great presentations. Very big thank you to Kathleen Lubino, who has to a very, very large part developed the tool together with UNM, who is responsible for the concept, in fact, who made it really, and in my opinion, very easy to use and almost self-explanatory tool, which is very difficult for such a complex issue, in fact. Thank you also to Marcel Bitrio, who was supporting us very much in answering the questions here. And thanks to all of you who were attending this meeting and asked also so many constructive and helpful questions. I hope we were able to answer most of them sufficiently. And yeah, so it's shortly before 12, so we are very much in time. So from my side, again, thanks to all of you. I wish you all a nice day and also a nice weekend, of course. And yeah, goodbye to you. I hope I didn't forget anyone. Oh my God. So, but I believe from the speakers, no, I think I have everyone covered. So again, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
We thank you too. Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you to all of you. See you.
See you. Thank you for joining.